Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Never Knew, or Inc. podcast by life coach Maureen. I am Maureen Scanlon. I am a certified life coach, relationship expert, change integrator, and podcaster, author, and all around just happy person to have all of these stories and all of these guests share their trials, their triumphs, their struggles, their heartbreaks. We're here to help one another. So today I have a special treat for everyone, and I'm so excited that he's here. I do these podcast episodes with people all around the country and all over the world. And today I actually have someone who's a neighbor. So he doesn't even know it yet, but we're both here from Arizona, and he's in my neighboring city of Gilbert. I'm here in Mesa. And when I found Barry and I saw his story, I knew I had to have him on, and he graciously accepted. And so I cannot wait to share this amazing story and this amazing man with all of my listeners. So Barry Adkins, his message is both powerful and inspirational, and it's a warning about the consequences of even one night of binge drinking. In 2007, Barry set out on an epic 1,400-mile journey and walked from Arizona to Montana with his son's ashes in his backpack. His audience takes away powerful takeaways. They're enthralled, and they want to know how it is that he can bring something so positive to something so tragic that happened in his life. And you're going to hear what he does to continue his son's legacy. He is a state advisory board at Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or MAD, which I think is such a wonderful organization to bring awareness. His 18-year-old son, Kevin, died of alcohol poisoning on the day he moved out on his own, in an effort to raise awareness about the dangers of alcohol abuse. He walked with the ashes in his backpack from Gilbert, Arizona to Kalispell, Montana. And I hope I said that right. Welcome, Barry. Welcome, welcome. How are you?
Good, Maureen. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Now, everyone, you need to know that he has just done such an amazing job as a motivational speaker. He's also an author of a book that I think everyone needs to go get. And what is the name? Kevin's Last Walk. That's what it was. Kevin's Last Walk, a father's final journey with his son. And that's so impactful. Just the title alone tells you part of the story. So we're going to start off, Barry, from that day, the moment that you had the most impactful, life-changing moment of your life, and what that felt like, and how hopeless and helpless it felt.
It's pretty much impossible to describe. Everyone says, I can't imagine, and they're absolutely right. For us, I think there was a very specific moment in time where the police officer handed us Kevin's driver's license. And until that moment in time, you're holding out hope that it's all a big mistake, right? That they've misspelled the last name and need another Kevin Adkins. They need to at least be next door, right? Any place but my place. But when they hand you your child's driver's license, you know he's gone and he's never coming back.
Was this It sounds like, so this was when he went out on his own, this was the first time he had gone out on his own. Did he go out celebrating? What was the circumstance around this tragedy?
So that was the day he moved out of the house. So
Oh,
that was his first day in a rented house with three other guys.
wow. Wow. And just kind of teenagers being teenagers,
Yep. Yep.
going out celebrating.
Yeah. They threw a little party for him that night, started with beer and moved on to shots. He actually left a voicemail for his sister that night talking about how drunk he was and how he loved his nephew Colin more than anything in the whole world. He passed out a short time later. The people at the party actually went in and shaved his head and his legs while he was passed out, thinking no big deal. But his buddy Craig was worried about him, went back in to check on him. First calls were difficulty breathing. Next call to 911 were not breathing. My son died alone in a hospital while I slept peacefully in my bed.
My gosh. Oh, Barry. So you got the call so you didn't know until the police officers actually showed up at your door. So they had called 911, the ambulance took him to the hospital, and then you had this officer show up at your door. And this is really, I'm sure it's a question everybody asks, but what do you do? What do you do? How, when your life changes in a moment like that, what are your steps, and are you just in a fog for a while until the realization hits you?
You're in a fog. There's no question about that. Really, for me, um, going to pick up his ashes basically was when I kind of had this moment. I went to pick up his ashes. You walk into a funeral home and there's nice pictures on the wall and they're playing music in the background, and they take me in and set me down in a nice comfortable chair with a big desk in front of me. Funeral director walks in, sets an urn down in front of me. An urn that holds all that remains of the kid that I birthed, changed his diapers, coached his baseball, soccer, football, taught him to shoot a gun and swing a golf club. All the remains of him were sitting in that urn in front of me. And for me, I knew one thing at that point, and that was I didn't want to be a victim. Because the world doesn't need any more victims. The world needs people who take something bad and they make something very good come from it.
Yeah. Did it take a while to just kind of let it marinate and process? And then when did you come up with the idea of this, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to continue Kevin's legacy. This is what needs to be done. When did that come about?
Well, I knew shortly thereafter I wanted to get out and tell the story. And basically that day, that's what I thought was I wanted to get out and tell the story. The idea to walk to Montana, I would say, was probably 6 months later, something like that. It wasn't something that came to me right away. It actually, if you have any audience that's older that's seen the movie Lonesome Dove, they will know that Tommy Lee Jones and Robert Duvall were in that, and that's where the idea to walk to Montana came from. In the movie, they did things on horseback. I walked.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. Although I do believe that's a healing process, right? It's almost like the Forrest Gump when he just runs and runs and runs. Was it sort of similar to the Forrest Gump moment where I need to get away, I need to be alone, and sort of I would see it as, this connection with Kevin saying, you know what, we're here together. I mean, when you're alone out there walking, did you have any of those aha moments where you felt Kevin with you?
Mostly when the wind was at my back. I felt like that's where he was. I mean, I wasn't alone. My wife met me every 3 miles. It took me a little while to figure out that it wasn't a race. I stopped and told a story probably 40 or 50 times to, I don't know, 10,000 people or something like that. But um, it was therapeutic. There's no doubt about it, because one of the big things for a parent when they lose a child is figuring out how to forgive themselves for what happened. And It took 1,400 miles and 5 pairs of shoes to find a way to forgive myself that I have.
Yeah.
It's an important part of the process.
And that's interesting. I think as parents, I have adult children and grandchildren, and no matter what happens, you do sort of blame yourself because you feel your only role as a parent or grandparent is to protect. And we know that's not true, but that logic doesn't come into play when you've lost a child. I imagine it's just, I should have been there. I should have known. I could have done something. So that's a really profound thing that I would love for you to share with the audience. So if there's anyone that's going through that right now, what do you tell them? How do you get them through the blame of themselves?
You simply can't blame yourself. I mean, that's something we understood pretty early on, that you just can't blame yourself for something like this. Really, the most you can hope for is to try to make something very good come from what happened. And in terms of grief, I say this all the time, and hopefully the audience doesn't think it sounds too harsh, but when you lose a loved one like that, you want to go back, you want to feel the way you did before they died, right? It's never going to happen. The old you died with that person. A new you is born. That new you can be better than the old you, but you'll never get back to be able to feel the way you did before they died. It's just not possible.
Yeah. And I've heard, grief never ends. It's never a getting over it. You don't get over that. You just cope better some days, and some days you don't. There's those waves of grief that I hear, people go through. So tell me, and this is, something I'm always very careful with my words. When people are going through something, I tend to stick my foot in my mouth. I don't know why. I'm just sort of a non-filtered gal. What is the worst thing that people can say to someone when they lose a child?
It's a good question. I've never been asked that. I never took anything that anybody said personally, because it's the spirit in which the words were said that matter. They're not saying things to be mean in general, but people are going to say stuff that are going to offend you, that you don't like, probably. I always took it as they were trying to be nice, whether it came out right or not. You shouldn't have a chip on your shoulder about it, because people are going to say something. They're going to say something stupid.
Because no one can understand the experience you're going through, and I think people just try. So you looked at their intentions underneath whatever the words were, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. So when you, and I know you've told your story, thousands and thousands of times, and what I want to know is what is the most profound thing that someone has said that Kevin's story has done for their life, or has made an impact, or if there's many stories, how does it bring you healing and peace and joy, and what kind of stories have you heard?
Probably too many to get into today, but the one that was pretty interesting for me is I spoke at a school up in North Scottsdale several years ago, and one of the students that was at that party, or at that presentation, was at a party, and there was a kid that was passed out. He wanted to call 911 because he had heard my story, or Kevin's story. The people at the party, the kids at the party, didn't want him to call 911, so he put this kid that was passed out in his car and drove him to an urgent care facility, who called 911, and they airbagged him out and saved his life.
Oh, and that's what this awareness is all about. This is what Kevin's legacy is if we can save more lives, how amazing that is. And that's the reward for your hard work and your being able to share, I think, the pain that brings that growth. So what do you, when you go and you talk at schools, or you go to these mad place conferences or motivational speaking, what is it that you want to share that will prevent this from happening again? How do you get this message across for this movement?
I just tell the story. That's one of the first things I tell everybody is, I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I'm just here to tell you a story. And as you listen to that story, think about what you want your story to be. I do leave them with three things. And the first one is about decision making, because the two most important decisions you're ever going to make are about drugs and alcohol. We know it isn't even close, right? You need to educate yourself and your children about the dangers of drug and alcohol abuse, as if your life and the lives of your children depend upon it. Because it does. Yeah. And the second thing is about adversity. Bad stuff's going to happen to all of us, right? It's not maybe, it will. And the way you handle it is going to define your life. Notice I didn't say it might, it will. And the third, and perhaps the most important, is about forgiveness. You know, it was easy for me to forgive the guys at the party because this was Kevin's decision. And as a parent, it's easy to forgive your kid. But there's one person that was pretty tough to forgive. And that was me. It took 1,400 miles and 5 pairs of shoes, but I have found a way to forgive myself. I heard a pastor describe it best once. He said that anger and vengeance lead to one thing: destruction. Forgiveness leads to healing. And sometimes the most important person you need to forgive is yourself. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, we're here for experiences, aren't we? We are. And I always say, those who have endured the most strength, endured the most growth. And I always say, or I always think in my thoughts, you know, the worst possible scenario I could think of, someone has gone through that and they stepped up and said, I'm strong enough to do this, and I can do this because there's something good that's going to come out of this. What do you think is an appropriate age to start talking to children about drugs and alcohol? And do you think we should have a course in schools that we should start really educating, besides just, you know, health, or, you know, something geared just toward that?
Well, the first part of your question is about when you should start. I don't know when that is, but I can tell you this much. Don't wait until it's too late. That's really the simplest way to put it. And what I tell kids and what I tell parents is exactly the same. It's a hard conversation to have, right? You walk in and say, okay, we're going to talk about drugs and alcohol today. That's difficult. But you can have the conversations indirectly. As parents, you know kids are listening to everything you say. Whether they're looking at you or not, they're listening. So have the conversation with your spouse, with your husband or your wife, because they'll be listening. You can find all kinds of examples online of things that have happened, and just have that conversation and let them listen. It's the same thing for kids. If you don't really want to talk to your parents about it, you can talk to one of your friends about it and let them hear you talking about it on the phone. And I guarantee you, there's going to be a conversation when you hang up. And I think it's kind of a sneaky way of doing it, but it's one way to do it.
That's really interesting. So inadvertent conversations are just as powerful as the direct conversations. And I think you're right. I think I've just taken in my 14-year-old grandson, and this is that time period where I need to have these conversations. And, they're finding out sooner and sooner what they want. And I think they're very self-aware of what, the dangers are. So I think the message is out there. I had met with a gentleman who does motivational speaking at colleges. that he talks about how you don't need to party and do drugs to have fun, and he actually does these events with no alcohol and no drugs.
I know him well. I'm thinking, was it
G-
Jake?
yes, GCU.
Yeah, yep. Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, to disrupt, but Jake and I are going to start trying to do our presentations together.
See, I love the connections. I love
Yeah,
that.
because you know, I get up and tell a story, and Jake is a young guy. I tell everybody I'm the old crusty dude, and he's the young guy that explains it all to him. So we've already done it once, and we're hoping to get that rolling because I think it's an interesting combination.
I do too. I do too. I think that's why it came to mind. I thought, if we think about a movement, what you do, first of all, your story impacts the parents and the grandparents to start having those conversations. And then pairing with Jake, he can have that connection with the younger people who really need to take it more serious. I think it's that view as young people have, as we did, we are indestructible and we are immortal, and just everybody drinks, everybody does this. So if I were to present my grandson in front of you right now and he would have that sort of idea of, it's no big deal, which he doesn't, thank goodness, but what do we say to these kids that it is a big deal, that it just takes that one time? It's just, how do we stop this? How about a good catchphrase? What's a good catchphrase we could use?
One of the things that I do say occasionally is that, you should wait until you're 21. And I have never met anyone that waited until 21 that regretted it.
Yeah.
You're just not going to regret it. At the end of the day, you wait, you think you're missing out on something, you're not missing out on anything. These people that you're trying to impress, I personally only keep in contact with 2 or 3 people I went to high school with. Other than Facebook stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you think you have to impress these people, and you don't. And that's what Jake is talking about too, right? That there are ways to have fun without drinking, and if you've got to drink to have fun, then you've got a problem.
Yeah. And I, from the life coaching side of it, I would love parents to encourage their children, to find some help, some mental health help, just to say, let's get you on the right path. One of the things I think is really important that we could prevent is to encourage our children to have a good circle of friends. So if you don't have friends that are drinkers, more than likely you're not going to be drinking. Do you agree that that's a pretty pertinent component of prevention?
Choose your friends very carefully. You're better off to have no friends than to have friends that get you in trouble. Just how it is.
Yeah, because there's plenty of obstacles along the way, and we got to keep you guys healthy and happy and have you hanging around. So when you do your motivational speaking and you tell your story, how do you teach young people to have this mindset, or how do you teach adults and parents to have a mindset where it's, because I always feel our self-medication of drinking and drugs, it's from a deeper place. How do we get people to not want to do the alcohol and drugs based on, how do we get a mindset that doesn't look for the escape?
Well, I don't really give any instructions on what to do. As I said, I'm just here to tell you a story. One of the things I say at schools, the principal, I've had several people say it's important, is first thing I say is, I'm not here to tell you how you live your life. I don't know you, you don't know me, and I have no business telling you how you live your life. I'm just here to tell you a story. But the important thing about that is that I tell them that I don't want them to listen here. I want them to listen here. Because this is where life change happens. And this is where the story comes from. I've stayed away from the X's and O's because I just think it would not be appropriate for me to get up, especially in front of students. And it's the same thing with adults. You know, if you get up there and you start telling somebody how to live their life, it is not going to work, for me anyway. I'm just here to tell you a story, and I want you to draw your own conclusions. And I think that works pretty well. Even when I'm speaking in front of students, you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
I just want them to hear that it can happen.
It's impactful enough just to tell the story, and they can figure it out and make up their mind just from how much pain they see and the devastation of how quickly your life can change in an instant. So that's effective because, you know, they see the result of when they do something, their actions, how it'll affect their family, and you're the face of the family, right? Yeah. So what's on the agenda for you? What's new? What big things do you have envisioned for making this thing even bigger than you already made this?
Really, the focus right now is going to be to work with Jake. I still do my stuff. He does, you know, his stuff, but we're trying to get opportunities to do it together because, you know, I could have somebody else that tells a similar story come up and, you know, talk after I do. And Jake, he does a great job with what he does, but he doesn't have that story behind it. And I think from my perspective, we've done it once at a school, and the reaction was very positive because it's two very, very different angles. So you reach a wider audience, you know, and I'm aware of the fact that in order to be successful, you can't be solo, right? You can be, I shouldn't say that, but if you have someone to be there with you that can, you know, speak to a different angle, I think it brings a lot to the party. And so that's, I'm glad you brought up Jake, because that's part of what we're trying to do. And for the audience, if you've got any contacts at schools, we'll come and do it.
I love it. The power of the internet. Here we are, Mesa, Gilbert, and Phoenix, and we're all connected and we've all communicated. So I think Jake is
that's great.
He's a wonderful young man. In fact, he reached out on LinkedIn, and I thought, boy, this is a really great thing he's doing. It really is, and especially since I had a daughter that was at NAU, and you know, it was all about drinking. It was all about the partying. It was as if the mentality was, without drinking, we cannot have fun. And I was scared to death. I easily could have been you, and it just scared you to death. And the releasing of you know, forgiving yourself. You know, I can see that. I could see I would have also been. I mean, there's nothing we can do. They have to live their lives, and I think that's the scary part of agreeing to be a parent and agreeing to bring children into this world is there's scary stuff out there. And so if people want to join this movement and they want to go along with the ride, or they want to join MAD, what do we do? Where do we send them? Where do they sign up? Where do they what can they do? What can people do to join this movement?
Good question. I mean, MAD is always looking for volunteers. If you've got some way that you would like to try to help, really what I would need and what Jake needs is contacts at schools, because it's always a tricky thing to try to get into a school, but it's always that personal touch that does the trick.
Great. Listeners, if you are teachers or principals or anyone that has any ability to reach out to your administration about having a program like this in your school, we highly recommend that you contact MAD and Barry, and let's get this going so there's a lot more awareness of how this can change, how this dynamic can now change in today's education system and in the arena that we're in today. So tell us, how well's your book doing?
Well, self-published books don't do all of that well. We've sold a few, but really the book was written because I have a friend who said that I needed to do more than just send him a copy of my journal. Writing a book was a pretty big task, no doubt about it. So, um, writing a book is just part of the process. Writing a book was harder than walking to Montana, by the way. It's a different thought process, that's for sure.
Wow, I've written to myself and published to myself, and it
You
is
know,
it's a cleansing for sure. It is it's a come pardon the quote, but a come to Jesus moment for yourself. Like, how much am I willing to share? How much am I willing to revisit? I think it's the revisiting part that's really, really difficult. Like he said, your journal, but that's that's what makes writing books so great is it's your story told by you as no one else has lived it and no one else can explain it. And so guys, I really would love all of you listeners to go and buy this book. It's Kevin's Last Walk, and I think it's important maybe even we could share this book with some of your young people that are, maybe they don't have this in their schools, or you guys maybe if you don't even want to have that conversation, you're not ready or you're nervous, maybe just get the book, put it strategically on the nightstand on the bed, and ask your young person to read it, and then say, hey, I'm open for discussion after you read it. I think it's a really good introduction to the conversation if it's a difficult conversation, and I think it'll be a very impactful way for your young person to kind of see the dangers and how quick it can happen, and then it isn't something to take lightly. So, in the spirit of the podcast, I Never Knew, what is the one thing that you could tell people that you never knew that you know now based on your story, your history, your experience, and your tragedy?
you know, probably what you can accomplish if you set your mind to do it. The idea to walk to Montana, um, I had people try to talk me out of it. Numerous people tried to talk me out of it because, it's a pretty big project, right? I had to convince my employer to give me 4 months off to do it. We had to schedule all this speaking stuff, which notmykid.org did all of that. They did a great job with that. I tell everybody if an old hillbilly like me can come up with the idea to walk to Montana with his son's ashes in his backpack, imagine what you can do. It's one of those things that I look back on it now. It's about 15 years in the rearview mirror. I'm surprised I didn't have any problems with it. It all worked out. Good Lord took care of us.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, you look like you're in pretty good shape. Do you work out on the regular, or is that just, what, you found this strength that you needed and it happened?
I prepped. I had run a few marathons, but it's hard to prep to walk 7 days a week, 15 miles a day. You can go out on the weekend and walk 15 miles 2 days in a row, but it's the day after day after day grind that can be challenging. And it's kind of a metaphor for life that you can't think about the fact that you have 1,350 miles still to go. At some point, I changed my mindset to I'm going to walk 3 more miles, take a break, and see what happens.
You're right. It's a beautiful metaphor because, one of the common threads that we have, whether it's, the health and wellness, life coaching, or anything, is people always say, you got to not look at what you haven't done. You have to pat yourself on the back for what you have done. And so that's a really neat way of saying, you know what, I know I've already walked 50, I've done really well, and I'm determined I'm going to break it up in little chunks. Was there ever a day that you just really, really faced that wall and said, oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know if today's the day that I can't go forward?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did. It was kind of between Payson and Flagstaff. Getting out of Arizona was the most difficult part of it, quite frankly, because we went up through Payson and over to Flagstaff. Phoenix is at 1,200 feet. Flagstaff is over 7,000 feet, and there's a lot of ups and downs between here and there. And, I kind of reached that point. I thought I knew about all the big hills, but I missed one. And I remember thinking, I don't know if I'm going to get this done. But that's kind of where I changed my mind and said, I'm just going to walk 3 more miles and see what happens.
That is, whew. Yeah, listeners, I know you probably think Arizona is one big flat land, but that's actually more Texas. So once you head out of Phoenix, listeners, if you haven't been to Arizona, you start, raising, and then you're going up to sort of these plateaus, and then San Francisco Peaks are in Flagstaff, which is the tallest mountain range in I don't want to say the West because it's the Rockies.
It's certainly the tallest one in Arizona. I've been up there. It's a tall one.
Yes, and I would get elevation sickness every time I visited my daughter up at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. So that's a big challenge in itself. It isn't as if you said, well, I'm going to head to Phoenix and then I'm going to go the New Mexico route, or I'm going to, kind of go around, or that's incredible. So you add in that elevation, and wow, that's just so amazing that you could push through that. Now, how did your wife feel when you finished? What was your celebratory thing that you guys did?
Well, it was certainly a big relief to get it done, right? I mean, I didn't have a single sick day or weather day the whole time. I had a lot of days that I didn't feel good, and there was days that the weather wasn't good, but my mindset was, well, it might be a little worse tomorrow, so I better go try it today. And typically, once I got going, I was fine. I won't say there wasn't any pain involved, because there was. At the time, I was probably 48, 47, something like that. So not all that young, but even walking it, there's a physical challenge to it. Um, we had a little in Montana. They had a little finale for me. They kind of did a rolling roadblock for 3 or 4 miles up to a place, and then I told a story. And then after that, we went out to a lake and had a picnic, and all the family and friends were there, and it was really enjoyable.
Wow, that is amazing. Now, how careful did you have to be with your diet? Because I can't imagine you got to eat a whole lot of steak and carbs along the way. I mean, that would be I have a hard time walking around the block when I've had a piece of pizza. So, I mean, how was your diet? How regimented did that have to be?
Well, I could go on for hours about the walk, but yes, my diet was pretty narrow. During the day, I ate Cliff Bars. That's pretty much all I ate, and it wasn't Gatorade. It was something close. It was called Cetomax, to keep my fluids up. Um, Typically at night, Bev would go out and get something from a restaurant around there, because my interest level in leaving the hotel after I got back to the hotel was pretty low.
Yeah.
So she would go out and get something. Um, and, I was still, even with that, I was pretty careful what I ate, because um, you just don't want all that in your stomach when you're walking
Oh
that
my
far.
goodness. Absolutely. And I'm going to ask something that's pretty personal, and you can choose to answer it or not, but how did this affect your marriage? How did the loss of Kevin affect your marriage, and how is your marriage today?
That's a great question, because that's another topic, right? Because quite often when a child dies, marriages can quite often dissolve because of that. Or you can choose to bring each other closer and not play the blame game. And for us, that was a very conscious decision, that we're not going to talk about whose fault this was or what happened. We chose to lean into each other instead of away. And I know that I've heard numerous stories about parents who lost children, and it destroys their marriage. In our case, it brought us closer together because we've been through something together that you're not going to have that in common with anybody else, and you learn, to lean into each other in a way.
That's perfectly said. You lean into each other because you're going to grieve at different stages and different ways, and maybe one day you've got the wave and the next day she's got the wave, and you tuned into each other. And I think as a couples coach and as a relationship expert, I always think, when hard times come, people tend to push away or oppose one another. And I think that's when this is something this tragic, and that you can lean into each other and actually bond, because you're right, no one else is going to experience that the way that the two of you are. And there's no way. So I'm so pleased to hear that. I want to say proud of you guys. Not that you need my validation.
It's an important part of it, right? Because there's lots of blame to go around, and I never really focused on that because it's not going to bring him back. I didn't focus on the legal aspect of it. I still don't. I focus on trying to make something good come from it, because that's the most you can hope for.
Yeah, because you could get lost in the anger, right? And you could get lost in, this is someone's fault and I'm going to make them pay. And I love that your mindset went to, I'm not going to get lost in that stuff. I'm not going to focus on the things that cannot be changed. I'm going to focus on the things that can be changed. And I think that's such a positive way to move forward.
Yeah, one of the things that I also, when I tell the story, one of the other things I tell them is that, attorneys will tell you that they can sue somebody over something. And I'm here to tell you, there is no money in the world that'll fix the hurt. It doesn't exist. They may lead you down that path, but I'm telling you, there's no money that'll fix the hurt. It doesn't exist.
That is the most profound thing I've heard that people can take away that I never knew. No matter what you think, no money in the world is going to bring back the one thing that you want most in this world. So before we close up, I want to ask, does Bev do anything on her own to do any movements or, anything? Or is this all a team thing, or do you guys each do separate things?
No, I do the speaking. As I told everybody on the walk, I'm just the dude that did the walking and talking. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and she's been at a lot of my presentations, and which was very useful, because the message that you share has to evolve. You don't just get up one day and have it right. And I would try something, and she would say, "Yeah, you lost him with that. You either need to fix it or don't do that." So through the years, the message has evolved significantly, because you have to think about, does this really advance the story, right? Yeah. And the words that you use matter. But I have a little bit of a funny story to tell you about that. So, I'm always open to new things to try to see if that helps get the message across. And one of the things you're told is to try to tie one part of the story back to another part of the story, right? And when Kevin moved out, he sat down in this brown chair and talked about how he couldn't believe his life was finally beginning and he was going to move out. And when the police officer walked into the house, he stood in front of that same brown chair. And so I tie that together in the message. The interesting part about it was, the first time I did it, was actually at a high school. There was probably 300 or 400 kids there. And I walked over and sat down next to her and said, "So what did you think about that brown chair?" And she goes, "Well, it's not brown, it's gold."
That didn't stand out. You know what? It was just a chair at that point, Oh, I love that. I love that because really that's not even the important part of the story, but it's funny that your mind doesn't even go to the detail. You're in the other details.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. And it does. It has to evolve. And I find the same thing as I start doing speeches or even when I wrote my book, I'm like, oh, I'm repetitive. And my husband is like Beth. My husband is very good at calling me out and saying, yeah, you keep repeating yourself, or yeah, that wasn't very, I don't like that story. And we have to have thick skin as authors and speakers with spouses that have no problem calling us out with their constructive criticisms. So here's the way I end every single podcast. I have to ask you something fun, and
Okay.
it is, what is your shameless self-indulgence that you do for Barry? What is the one thing that you do that it just brings you joy and it kind of takes you away, like Calgon, take me away?
I have a cookie every night before I go to bed.
You do? What kind? What kind of cookie?
Depends upon Bev. I Several years ago, I told her the only way to eat cookies is when they're fresh baked. So most nights I get a fresh cookie before I go to bed. I'm pretty spoiled.
Yes, you are. Like fresh baked cookies. We're not talking like throw you the Oreo pack while you're in bed or anything, right?
That occasionally happens, but most of the time there's fresh cookies.
Oh, Bev, you are a gem. I'm just gonna say,
Yes.
yeah, she just
Yeah.
sounds like an amazing person, as are you, Barry. And I am so grateful for you today, sharing your story. Thank you. I'm humbled that you would come on this podcast, and that's what this is all about. It's about sharing to help others and to raise awareness for those things so people have hope. So people that are going through what you're going through, before they go through it, we can prevent these things. And bringing your own heart and your own story and your own soul and your own pain and tragedy forward is such, I think, a healing thing when we can give purpose to something that has happened to help someone else. And I think
Yeah, I
it's
don't
amazing.
know if I mentioned it, but yeah, on Facebook, it's Kevin's Last Walk, and the website is kevinslastwalk.com. That's the two best ways to get a hold of me.
That's what I was just going to ask. And your book is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all.
And you can order it from the website as well.
Okay, guys, go order that from kevinswalk.com.
Kevin's Last Walk, yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Brain here.
I think
Kevin,
you just type in my name, it comes up, but yeah.
And I'll have everything in the episode as well. I will have in the description when we have your episode go live, I'll have all those websites where people can reach out to you, and even MAD. We'll put in the MAD link there. Is there any fundraising or anything that people can help with? People can donate money.
I'm not a nonprofit, really. Not really. The main thing is contacts, right?
Okay.
As Jake will tell you as well, is help us get us a connection at a school or a church or whatever, because that's really the money part of it is not what I'm really focused on.
Yeah, no, definitely. Hey guys, if you're listening and you have a lot of teacher friends or you're in the educational system, I myself am going to do the same thing. I'm going to do a post. That's why social media is great. You have 5,000 friends sitting out there. Someone can get us some contacts. Someone can help what we need to do to get this awareness out there. So Barry, I will bid you farewell, and hopefully our Arizona weather will cool off sometime soon. I'm completely over this and I'm ready for October already. I don't know how.
Yes, we all are.
This has been the driest monsoon and the hottest summer, and I grew up here in Arizona, so I'm too hot. I feel like the people that winter in Iowa, where they just don't leave the house. I mean, it's getting to that point here in Arizona.
Yeah, well, we have a we managed to get a cabin built up east of Payson. So I just got back from there yesterday. We spent about a week up there. We're down here when we have to be, and then we go back up there.
There you go. That's it. Get to that cool weather until that makes us sunbirds, where we leave, where the opposite of snowbirds, where we leave when it's hot. Just so everybody knows that about Arizonans, is we get the heck out of here when it's hot. So thank you, my friend. You are a complete and total joy. And ask Jake about Maureen, and I'll tell you, we will all still be in contact, and I will find you those contacts, and we're going to get you in all of these schools. Thank you for your amazing story. Thank you for your strength, and thank you for being an inspiration to all of us. And we all hold Kevin in our hearts, and he's got a legacy. He's got a legacy because of his dad and his mom. So what a blessing he had to have you as parents.
Thanks for having me on, Maureen.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.